People sometimes object to the lives of the visionaries, as though all the visionaries should have become priests or nuns and pursued a religious vocation. And the fact that they did not in Medjugorje is somehow counted against them and held against them. Now here I think there's a confusion between being a visionary and with actual sanctity. To be a visionary, it's not because they deserve it, it's a grace, freely given. A visionary ought to become a saint, just like all of us ought to become saints. But we shouldn't assume that a visionary is necessarily a saint. Saint Bernadette really is quite exceptional. She showed a lot of prudence, wisdom, care. The other thing is, I said visionaries are not necessarily saints. We have to leave that space, Again, Saint Bernadette was lucky because she did not want to remain in Lourdes. She wanted to escape the crowds, and also the bishop and her family and the local pastor all had the wisdom to say, we need to move her out of Lourdes before she becomes a freak show. Okay, so she was lucky to escape. It was sad for her because she could never see Lourdes again. Her last apparition, because the apparitions began in February, March. And her last apparition is one that few people know about. It happened in July that year, where the crowds were already so big, she was already a celebrity. So she had to sneak in on the other side of the Gave, the river, and she looked at the grotto, and Our Lady appeared. And they were there, it's like 100, 200 yards apart. And they just smiled at each other and bowed. That was the last apparition she had, because she couldn't go up to the grotto because of the crowds. It's sad, it's poignant, but it kind of shows what could happen to a visionary. Now, I want to look at one particular apparition, La Salette in France, which happened just before Lourdes, where such wisdom did not apply. The mission of the shepherds is ended. The shepherds are the children, Melanie and Maxima. That of the church begins. They can move away, become dispersed in the world, even unfaithful to the great grace received. But the apparition of Mary will not thereby be shaken, for it is certain, and nothing coming after can act against it. And notice his wisdom. He says the apparitions are real, it's a great grace, and the visionaries might even be unfaithful afterwards, but that does not negate the reality of La Salette. And it's kind of prophetic he said that, because the two visionaries lived slightly chaotic lives. It's not their fault, I don't think. They were the first celebrity visionaries that we really know of, because people hounded them and chased them, elevated them to this great status. They didn't want it, but it had its effect. So what happened is that Melanie, the girl, she joined 4 different orders, religious orders, and she left all of them. She was dispensed from her vows, and then she died in a private house in Naples with a friend. And that's how her life came to an end. The boy, Maxima, is an even sadder story, because he flunked out of high school. He tried to become a doctor, that failed. He joined the army temporarily, then he was dismissed from that. He tried to train as a pharmacist, that didn't work out. And then he lent his name to a fellow who made liquor, kind of cashing in on the visionary fame. And this guy made a lot of money with the liquor, but cheated Maxima. And Maxima himself is supposed to have died penniless, alcoholic. He died in a state of grace, having received the last sacraments, but he was penniless and alcoholic. Like, really what the world would look at and say, this is a failure. This is not exactly how you expect visionaries to end up, but this is what happened to the two of them, because they are hounded and treated like celebrities. So we have to remember, visionaries are human beings. They're not saints. They're called to be saints, just like we are. We have to leave them alone.